You're listening to Your Words Unleashed podcast with host Dr. Leslie Wong, helping women scholars master their writing habits and publish a book that matters. Hello, writers. Welcome back. I hope your semester is off to a good start and that you're setting yourself up for success. Today, I'm going to be talking about something that comes up a lot with my coaching clients, and that is ways to manage fears around writing. Notice that I said manage and not get rid of. I'll come back to the reasons why very soon. So this episode is inspired by a coaching session I just had with one of the members of my Get It Published group coaching program. But before I dive into things, let me just take a moment to appreciate this amazing group of 13 first-time scholarly authors. Most are women of color and first-generation college students, two groups I am ultra dedicated to serving. They range from postdoctoral fellows all the way up to deans of colleges and come from fields as diverse as history, science and technology studies, sociology, political science, criminology, and childhood studies. We met weekly from early June to mid-August, and the level of commitment that these women brought was unreal. Not only did they complete book proposals and make connections with editors, but they also churned out articles like you wouldn't believe. One member who had not been able to prioritize writing for the past few years submitted 3 different journal articles over the space of 2 weeks. And people made huge amounts of progress, even though they were dealing with things like getting COVID, moving across the country to start a new job, and traveling around the world to do fieldwork. There is just something about social support and community with others who get what you're going through that can provide fuel for your fire when it comes to writing. And I'm going to come back to this point. So getting back to the topic of today's episode, one of the main things that holds people back from writing their book is feeling terrified. And although the word terrified may seem dramatic, the client I just worked with used it multiple times throughout our session to describe her feelings about working on her manuscript. And this fear had kept her from taking even the first step of printing out her dissertation and rereading it for the past 2 years. So my view is that fear arises when your inner critic is trying to protect you and keep you safe. As I've talked about before, your inner critic has positive intentions, even when it's making you feel anxiety and self-doubt by telling you horrible things about yourself and your writing. The truth is that you can't fully get rid of your inner critic, and also that there are times when it's been extremely useful to you and helpful in getting you to where you are now. So knowing this, I want to talk about 4 different strategies you can use to manage your fear rather than try to rid yourself of it entirely. So what are they? My first suggestion is acceptance. This means accepting that fear is a normal reaction to doing anything new that has a lot of personal meaning or feels like it has high stakes for your life. For a lot of folks, when they feel fear arising and don't find a way to deal with it, it can easily turn into stubborn resistance to doing their work. And they start to associate negative feelings with writing. They can also end up doing things like procrastinating, prioritizing teaching or other more short-term research projects, or not letting anyone see their work until it's quote-unquote perfect enough to avoid these fears. And does this sound familiar to any of you? I've definitely experienced all of them. But how differently things might go if we just accepted from the outset that what you're doing is inherently scary, and that's okay. For me, having written 2 books on my own, and now I'm working on a 3rd sole-authored manuscript, I can say that book writing can be truly terrifying. But also, feeling fear is no reason to not do it. And there's a quote I like from essayist Brianna Wiest that goes, "Remember that the minute you take your first step into the life of your dreams, the first to greet you there will be fear. Nod, keep walking." Accepting that fear is a natural part of the process, rather than something you need to push away or eliminate, gives you the space to work with it instead of against it. Moving on to my second point. So now you've accepted that you will sometimes feel fear when you're working on your book, and there's nothing wrong with that. Now what? My second suggestion is for you to investigate the inner messages that underlie your fear. What exactly is it that you're afraid of? This is where it's incredibly important to drop into our bodies rather than just try to understand things in a cerebral way, like we are so used to doing as academics. Your body is constantly giving you messages and advice that, if you actually listened and took seriously, could lead you down a path where you'll be feeling better sooner. So when you feel fear, pay attention to where it's coming up in your body. Is it tension in your chest? Do you get a headache or a migraine? Is your stomach upset and twisted in knots? Focus on the sensation, as uncomfortable as that might be, and then pretend that this part of your body has its own thoughts to share with you. Imagine holding a microphone up to this discomfort and listen for the messages it's trying to tell you. It might be saying things like, slow down, breathe, relax, or protect yourself. It might also critique you. Here are some common critical thoughts people have when trying to write their first book that can manifest as fear. Things like, you have no idea what you're doing, and you're going to mess this up. Or, you're claiming to be a world-leading expert in your field. Who do you think you are, and why do you think you're better than other people? Or, if you commit to writing your book, you won't be able to finish. You're someone who doesn't follow through. Or, once your book is out, your ideas will be torn apart by critics. Why not just save yourself this pain by not putting yourself out there? So once you get a hold of these inner messages, take a step back from them and look at them with curiosity. You don't have to believe these thoughts. Instead, you can reassure your fears that you are safe and that you are figuring things out as you go. This is the time to do the opposite of what you normally do, which is probably believing the thoughts and feeling demoralized. And give yourself compassion and encouragement to try again. So my third suggestion is for you to remember all the times in your life you did something scary, that you didn't know how it would turn out, and it worked out fine or even amazingly. For example, one of my coaching clients was feeling huge amounts of resistance to writing. She was afraid her ideas weren't innovative enough and that she wasn't enough of an expert to be writing about her topic. In short, she was judging herself and seeing everything in terms of limitations rather than possibility. These feelings stopped her in her tracks, and she was making very little progress in her work. So I asked her to reflect on a time when she was terrified to do something, but did it anyway, and experienced a really positive outcome. She thought for a moment, and then remembered being a high school student back in her home country in Southeast Asia, and the moment she found out she'd be moving to the United States and starting her life over. Of course, she had no idea what to expect, but she embraced the excitement of this life change. And as a result of this very scary transition, she ended up eventually getting into her dream college, obtaining a PhD, meeting the love of her life, having a child, and getting a prestigious postdoc position in the US. So I asked her how she got through that time of not knowing. She reflected that it was her sense of curiosity, openness to new experiences, and treating this phase of moving into the unknown as a big adventure that had pulled her through. So we talked about what might happen if she could approach writing with the same sense of curiosity and openness. What if writing was an adventure with exciting twists and turns, rather than an externally imposed burden? She then used this metaphor of being an adventurer to motivate herself to write. And I'm happy to say that over the next 6 months, she was able to get herself unstuck to the point where she published really impactful work. And she was eventually offered several different tenure track positions. So, an exercise you can do is to journal about times in your life when you jumped into the void and landed on your feet. What worked for you in terms of your attitude, your thoughts, and your actions back then? And now, think about ways you can channel some of those things into your current work. So moving on to my last tip. My fourth point is very simple. Get social support. Just as we all need people to hold us accountable to our goals, we also need them to empathize and commiserate with us through the process of book writing. I've said this before, but I don't think I would have completed my first book without being part of multiple different writing groups of other folks who are also writing books. A lot of people tend to keep their writing under wraps and not share their struggles and challenges with anyone else. In academia, there can be a strong sense that you have to look like you have it all together for people to take you seriously. Not only does this keep you from bonding with others and getting really useful advice and feedback, but it invariably makes the whole process harder and takes a lot longer as well. So this means you need to reach out to other people and form networks of support. They may only last for as long as you're writing your book, or they might turn into lifelong friends. You never know. In the case of my own coaching groups, I know that the reason why members are able to make so much progress so quickly is because they're setting goals that feel good to them and that a whole group of people is supporting them in and holding them accountable for. And I'm proud to say that in the case of all 3 of my previous groups, members have continued to meet and co-work and share their work with one another long after our time together is over. And I'll just add, if you want more information and details about my next group, which I'm running again starting in January 2023, head over to my website. So I hope this episode has given you some tools to manage your fears around writing. To quickly sum up my 4 tips, number 1, accept that fear is a natural part of doing something new that is important to you. Number 2, find out exactly what it is that you're afraid of and reassure your fears that you are safe and figuring things out as you go. Number 3, journal about all the times in your life you did something incredibly scary that turned out great for you. And think about what worked for you back then and try to apply these things to your current situation. And finally, get social support in the form of writing groups where you co-work and receive feedback from one another. And you can listen to podcast episode number 12, all about writing groups, to give you some ideas on how to form and run them. So remember that there's nothing wrong with being scared to do something. It's how you know you're ready to take up more space and play a bigger game. I'll be back again soon with some more practical tips to help you write and publish a book that matters. I'll see you next time. Thanks for tuning in to Your Words Unleashed podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with other writers or leave a rating and review. To find the full transcript and catch all the latest from me, check out my website, yourwordsunleashed.com. I'll talk to you next time. Happy writing!